Hi, everybody. My name's Eric Lambert. I'm the CEO of Bonfire Collective. We're a marketing agency that serves outdoor and environmental brands. And we are doing The Brief. This is the first episode ever of The Brief. The hope is that we're going to be bringing some hot takes on what's happening in the outdoor world, conservation, the environment, and how that blends with marketing. So today I'm really stoked to be talking with Becca Wainess. She's one of the newer members of our team. And you have like a really interesting political background in advertising, and that's really timely right now. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about that background so that our audience knows a little more about you and then maybe share a nugget on like what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, well, I'm Becca Wainess. I'm one of the media directors here at Bonfire. And I've been working in Democratic politics for about the last 5 years, kind of working on like primarily federal races, like Senate races, House races, also working with some like nonprofits and stuff. But like you said, just like all parts of advertising that these campaigns run, which are usually like really big fundraising operations, really big like get out to vote efforts, persuasion programs. There's a lot of advertising that political campaigns do. And today we're going to be talking about how some of the like fundraising tactics that we've used on political campaigns can be applied to like nonprofits.
Heck yeah. This is like such a fun topic. I think when I started the company, I don't think I could have imagined having this conversation. But it's exactly what I built the company to do, is to be working with conservation environmental nonprofits and helping them tell their stories better. And advertising is such a key way to be able to scale that storytelling. Why do you think so many nonprofits don't use their paid channels or don't use them much?
Yeah, I mean, like advertising is just really expensive. So I definitely kind of understand like why brands and nonprofits would be kind of hesitant to just like throw money into advertising, because you really do like need a significant amount to reach any kind of like impactful audience size kind of effectively. But I definitely think that it's like a really useful tool for especially fundraising, especially if you're trying to do any kind of like lead generation fundraising program. Like you're going to want to use paid advertising to kind of like increase your audience and grow your list and talk to different people essentially.
Okay, so this totally makes sense, right? Like there's a real investment in not only getting enough budget to have it go as far as you want it to go, but there's also time to manage that and the skill and expertise to manage it properly. So without that, you end up putting money in a pit instead of activating it properly. But when you do activate it properly, what can you achieve? If you're like, let's say you're a conservation nonprofit or you're doing some advocacy, cause-based nonprofit marketing and you want to put money into paid, like what can paid do for you that organic and earned cannot do?
Yeah. I mean, essentially like advertising, and what I think is like so useful about advertising is you're able to grow your audience and you're able to talk to different people. Like if you're only doing like owned channels or earned media or anything like that. I mean, earned media, like you're going to be you're trying to reach new audiences, but it's never guaranteed necessarily that like you're going to get your article written, like an article written about you, or you're going to get on like an interview on a news station or something. So I feel like advertising can be so useful because you can talk to like a targeted audience and grow your list or grow who, knows about your organization or knows about your issue or your cause or whatever you're trying to achieve. And so it's a way to kind of like, talk to new audiences and bring them kind of like into your organization. And ideally, like you said, like you're doing it in like this strategic way where like you can continue to talk to those people like over time and cultivate those people and get them like to be long-term kind of supporters of your organization.
That totally makes sense to me. So one advantage is You can choose exactly who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Another advantage is you can guarantee that you're going to be able to get in front of them. And maybe the most important is that if you are putting the right message in front of the right people at the right time and they're biting on that, you now can have them in your network, whether
Yeah.
that's through retargeting, capturing their email, whatever it might be. And that gives you the opportunity to develop a relationship. It's not something you can do with earned
Yeah.
media necessarily. So yeah, I mean, I worked at a conservation nonprofit running marketing there for 5 years. And one of the big challenges that we always had was always talking to the same people, right? Like we did use advertising, but we used it in a very limited way. And it seems so valuable to be able to break out of the bubble of who's already in your network.
Yeah. Yeah, and with like advertising, you're able to talk to more audiences, but you can also like narrow it down to be like people interested in environmental issues or like watching certain channels on YouTube or like in a certain area, of the country or whatever. Like you can pick kind of how you want to narrow it down, but it doesn't have to be this like broad talking to everyone trying to find someone who like resonates with it. You can definitely get audiences. You can find audiences online that are like already predisposed to like want to engage with your content.
Something that I've learned about digital paid media in the last couple years is that you can often back into understanding your audience and message in a way that you can't really do with just organic, right? You can test messages at scale with certain audiences. You can understand which audiences even care about the cause that you have. How do you think about using data to kind of work in reverse to understand who you should be talking to?
Yeah, I think that that's also like a really big appeal of advertising, and something that I really like about fundraising online is that you can like try, just like you said, like you can try all these messages on through a Facebook ad, but you're not going to want to like run the exact same messages right up after each other on a Facebook feed or an Instagram feed or anything like that. So using that, like using social media, and especially with fundraising, I like it because you get that immediate feedback. It's really easy to be like, okay, I made money on this or I didn't make money on this. And you can test these different messages, and that'll help you like know what's going to be effective and really like what's resonating. And so that's also then useful to use on a different channel. Like say you run something on Facebook through ads and you're like, I'm going to test 4 different hooks, like 4 different fundraising hooks. The one that works the best, I'm then going to go use as an organic post because I know that like we have data to show that that worked. And you can use that for a place where like you're not going to be able to test all of those at the same time or anything like that. So I really enjoy that kind of like analytical aspect of advertising, that you can kind of like sneaky in a way, like test all these audiences or test all these messages and find like audiences. Also, same thing with, say you're testing a specific hook and you're testing against like 6 audiences, then you can know like, okay, this is the audience that's like really resonating with this message. And you can use that again for future advertising campaigns, but you can also use it on different channels, which is really useful.
Totally. Yeah, there's so much learning you can kind of build over time with a paid program. Well, yeah, and you just mentioned the feedback cycle you get fundraising because people are making donations or not. Let's talk about that a little bit, because in politics, yeah, maybe you get that donation immediately because people already are aware of that cause. In a lot of circumstances with advocacy or conservation or really any nonprofit that doesn't have a lot of mind share already, there's some education and awareness that needs to happen before a donation's likely. So how do you think about kind of building trust with an audience to eventually lead to that gift or that connection with a donor, possible donor?
Yeah, the way that I kind of think about fundraising programs and like paid media is that I kind of just see paid media as like lead generation essentially in all aspects of a fundraising program. So like you can both do like just straight lead generation. I'm just trying to like say like acquire someone's email address, and that's like the ask, and I'm not asking them for their like a donation or anything like that. But you can also ask someone for a donation, and I also still view that as lead generation. Like I think that like the main kind of cultivation to get somebody to like eventually donate is better suited for like an email program than it is for an ad program, just because ads are so expensive. And so if you have like, if you're constantly just trying to ask people for donations and like they don't know who you are, like that's not going to be the best and most effective way to like raise money essentially, right? And so moving through kind of like a different mindset of being like, okay, first I'm going to try to do some awareness, and then eventually I'm going to try to get them in the email program, and then that's where I'm like really going to try to get that donation. And then maybe during like a year-end appeal or like a really big fundraising push, maybe that's when I like try that direct ask like fundraising ad, because there's like a lot of urgency or whatever that you could use during that time. And so but those people that I'm then getting through that fundraising ad at your year-end appeal is also still lead generation, and is somebody who is just like a known donor who you're able to bring into your email program and then like continue to talk to and maybe ask to donate again in like a couple months or whatever. So they're just like, I would say lead generation that's like a little extra fun. Like it's like people we know are like super invested in the organization. So yeah, I think you kind of like can use ads in a lot of different ways, and it can be both in like that awareness way to get people to like to know what your organization is, and then do like a lead generation ask after that and kind of bring them in. But I think ultimately like any kind of donation, that like cultivation is probably going to happen over like an email program than it would over like an ad program.
So I've got a question for you. Do you believe all paid media for nonprofits is really just lead generation?
Yeah, I think so. Just because for that kind of cultivation piece, like using those owned channels that you have is going to be like the best way to continue speaking to that audience. But as you're growing your audience, like that's kind of where advertising feeds into. And so if you're doing a straight lead gen ask where you're trying to get somebody's like email address to then have them come into your email program, obviously that's lead gen. But even like a donation ask, like that is getting somebody, ideally somebody new, into that email program so you can keep talking to them over and over again, or asking somebody to join our social channels. Like again, then we can like ideally talk to them and know that they're part of our list. And like cultivate that relationship. Like that's going to be like the biggest way to cultivate is through those like owned channels that we have. And paid is going to be the best way to like bring people in. So yeah, it is all just like lead gen, just through like different kind of like means. Even if it is like a direct fundraising ask, like ideally we're getting new people to come into our programs through a donation.
Yeah, you can always hope for the donation out of the gate, but oftentimes that awareness and education is necessary to over time build that trust that leads to the gift and hopefully a recurring gift. Well, not only is it politics season, but it's also giving season, right? This is November, December, traditionally account for 30 to 40% of gifts that come in for nonprofits annually. So it's a huge spike at the end of the kind of tax calendar here, where people can make that gift and get a charitable deduction. We, at Bonfire, we wouldn't necessarily recommend putting a bunch of dollars against paid in Q4, even though that's the case. Like, why is that?
Yeah, well, just like we were saying, the like whole, advertising is lead gen, really focusing on lead generation coming into that like year-end appeal season is, ideally doing that in like maybe even like Q1, Q2, Q3, like leading into the end of the year is going to be a way to increase the size of your email list, your social channels, your whatever, like where you're going to be making those asks. And then, having time to kind of cultivate that relationship and like make sure the people are like invested in your organization and invested in the mission. And so you ideally would spend a lot of the money like earlier in the year so that you have all these new names that you can keep talking to. And then you can do your big fundraising push through those like own channels that you have at the end of the year.
So we recently helped Protect the Dolores work on a cause-based campaign, getting the message out about a possible new national monument. We had a moderate budget, not a crazy budget, but we were able to talk to 60,000 people localized to the area around where the monument's going to be, as well as 1 million people here in the Front Range, just through the paid efforts. And that totally changed the game for awareness around the cause. Why do you think it is that more causes and nonprofits don't use paid? It comes back to that first question, but it's an important one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it is expensive, so I get like the hesitation with it. But I think it is like a really effective tool for bringing like awareness around an issue or a cause or a mission or whatever you want to talk about. And you can also kind of like decide what's going to be like the most strategic way to use advertising, and if that's going to be awareness, like narrowing your audience so that you're talking to you don't necessarily need to talk to 1 million people, but maybe you want to talk to 10,000 people over a couple months, and like make sure that you're like talking to them consistently, making sure that they like remember your message, because the more you talk to them, the more likely that they are to remember your message. And so there's different ways to kind of do it in a way that's like more cost effective than like having this really broad audience and you want to talk to them over the course of a year or something like that could end up being really expensive. But if you narrow your audience, kind of focus your message and figure out what you really want them to remember, you can have a really effective program and get people to like know about your issue. And you could do that through like, awareness ads. You could do it through, petition signups or lead generation. Also, like you are getting some awareness, obviously, even if someone doesn't just, immediately give you their email, like they can learn about you through that lead generation ad that you're serving them. So, I think, just kind of looking at it at different ways of how can I do this in a strategic way, and maybe even narrowing it down a little bit to bring down the costs.
Yeah, and the more you narrow it, the more expensive it is. But with a reach campaign, you can get so much visibility for not very many dollars.
Yeah, especially on Facebook. Like it's still very cheap to advertise on Facebook and Instagram versus like you don't have to run something on like Hulu. Like you don't have to run an ad on like one of the most expensive placements that there is. So definitely like there's easy ways to find large audiences through like social platforms.
And even with video platforms, using targeting in geographies or interests or whatever with a platform like YouTube, right? Like you can get an incredible amount of visibility in a somewhat targeted way without having to like run a national
absolutely
video ad.
Yeah, and like YouTube is I think is the most far-reaching platform that exists. So you can reach like almost anyone in the United States through YouTube.
Well, I really appreciate you making time to talk today. This is such a niche but really fascinating topic for us here and for a lot of nonprofits that might be considering how do we work paid programming in. There's a lot to think about, and I think the takeaway here is you can reach new people, and you really should know what you're doing before you begin, or you can end up spending a lot of money that doesn't go anywhere. But again, thank you for making time to chat about it. There's so many more questions I feel like we could talk about and explore. And it's also just great to have you here on the team at Bonfire and bring all that political experience, cause-based marketing, and seeing the bigger picture of how the paid ties in with the organic.
Yeah, this has been great.
Good.